Hello, everyone. This is Pascal Hansen. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Zeta, and this is Talk Thursdays. Today, I have the privilege and pleasure of speaking to Sofia about human resources management. It's a hot topic. It's a challenge for a lot of business owners. So thanks for being with me here today, Sofia.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, what are the most common challenges around managing a workforce that businesses are facing today?
Whew. So I love the way you started it off, saying it's a hot topic, and it definitely is. Um, right now in today's labor market, I would say across different industries, across different company sizes, it actually doesn't matter what company size, how long you've been in business. Everyone is struggling with attracting talent and retaining talent. And in today's labor market, this has become the focal point, I would say, for a lot of businesses. And it's left business owners feeling frustrated and confused and helpless and exhausted with this kind of vicious cycle of, if we do find talent, we just can't hang on to them tight enough.
Yeah, I've heard that from business owners too. Is like, how do we make it attractive? And then I think to add to that, there's a lot of legislation and you have to be aware of different diversity. And there's so many things that make it, I think, a more complicated landscape than it was in the past.
Absolutely. Yeah. People, I think, underestimate what HR is all about. It is complicated. There are a lot of moving pieces. Legislation makes it more complex. Changing legislation. I mean, during the pandemic, we saw it every single day, almost from minute to minute. Legislation was changing. And so it's difficult. We just don't know what we don't know unless we're experts in HR.
Exactly, which is why I'm a big believer in delegate to experts. Like, don't try to wrap your head around it. Call Sophia.
Yes.
So when it comes to HR, like, where should you start?
Yeah, so I think oftentimes business owners are almost stuck in the weeds. Like we are focused on running the business and the operation side of it. And one piece that we forget is that we actually need to focus on the people. Because at the end of the day, it's the people that are servicing our clients and our customers. It's the people that are the face to the business. And so we have to nurture that. And we have to focus on how can we attract and retain and develop talent here within our company, because that's going to set you up for long-term success, where you kind of shift from just surviving as a company to thriving. In order for us to thrive, we have to take care of our people so they feel more than a number.
Yeah.
And we develop them and we build kind of that talent pipeline and succession plan in our companies.
Yeah, and I think when you interact with a business, you're interacting with people, you don't want your customers dealing with someone that's unhappy. They can feel it, right? And maybe you get those few seconds to make a first impression of your business. You want it to be a favorable one, right?
Absolutely.
So what would you say that you do at Upskill Consulting, and what services do you offer? How do you support businesses? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I would say that, at Upskill Consulting, we help growing companies with fine-tuning, streamlining their HR processes and practices. And what we find is that, when companies grow quickly, they kind of get to this tipping point. And what they come to realize is the way that we once did it will no longer work. We have to start getting standardization and processes. We need to streamline things because we have to. We've got more people. And usually that tipping point, I would say, is around 10, 15 employees. The second we get to around that number, we just can't do it the way we once did.
Oh, that's a good metric, just so people are aware, right? And I think, certainly from my experience, you can be busy growing and you're working in the business. There's so much to take care of, but I come from, I'm looking at risks in business, right? So that's kind of my bias. So I would think the larger you grow, if you don't have certain practices in place, now you're setting yourself up for potential lawsuits and problems that are going to get bigger if you don't have that basis of putting certain parameters and policies in place. Would you agree with that?
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And typically when we work with our clients, we help them in various different facets. It could be HR consulting, it could be training, it could be coaching. But whatever it is, what we often say to clients is, let's first start with compliance. that's where we start, is compliance, because quite frankly, that is a must-have. It's not a nice to have, it's a must-have. Let's set up that foundation first and then start tackling all of the other HR facets. And so I couldn't agree more with you. And that's why we actually, created starter kits on our website recently. It was really speaking to the business owner who is overwhelmed and tired, and they don't know where to start, and they just don't have the know-how in HR. So we have a bunch of starter kits that at least get the wheels in motion. And one of those starter kits is around compliance that we've just discussed.
Yeah, I think that's vitally important. And I know I've met a lot of businesses that may be more mature, but they were growing. And when they were a startup, as a lot of startups, you want to be bootstrapping it, and, investing in someone like yourself would make sense. It's like, we can do it later, but then you forget to do it. And certainly with what I do, I'm like, when we're talking about insurance, it's like, well, what's in your shareholders agreement? What? And they're like, oh, we never did that. Right. So you never did it. Now you're at massive risk. Well, we kind of have to start there first because it ties into everything else. So, right. Like, great to have those kits and at least get started and start thinking about what you need to know that you may not be aware of. So.
Yeah, it's sort of getting the house in order, isn't it? It's just,
Yeah.
let's just get at least that again, strong foundation, and then we can start fine tuning and adding and strengthening, but do it in a phased approach.
Yeah, exactly. So what are some of the other benefits of investing in strengthening the HR and people practices?
I think long gone are those days where we view HR as the paper pushers or the ones that just have to do the transactional work. I think people have come to the realization, I would say especially it's been heightened during the pandemic, that HR is critical to the success of an organization. And so I would say when you invest in HR, the first thing is you are mitigating risk. And that is huge. So when you start to work on compliance as a starting point, you're at least hopping into more of the fire prevention rather than firefighting mode, right? So you're taking a more proactive approach. The second piece I would say is once you have all of those standardization processes and all of that in place, that structure, then it ties into employee engagement. You have far more engagement, employees are far more satisfied. That then leads to retention. And that's the biggest pain point that we're experiencing right now is employees are just walking out the door. And so my take on it is, let's try to figure out what we can do to hang on tighter to the people that we have. Let's make the grass greener in our companies, as opposed to them looking for the grass is greener somewhere else. And that requires us to focus on the human element, our employees, our people side of the business.
And I guess with the pandemic, we, now have the complexity of, everyone had to work remotely, and now companies are saying, no, you have to be back in the office. And maybe some of those employees bought, housing further from the city because they figured, oh, I like working remotely or not. So I think, for most businesses, it's smart to be maybe flexible, but I know there are some companies that are going, if you're not coming back in, then you're not working with us anymore. So I would imagine it's fairly challenging. How do you come up with a policy that's going to fit everyone, or do you do it by department, or how do you set that up? I mean, to me, it sounds like that could be a minefield.
It is. It's a beast of a project. And what I would say to you is that we're all learning and we're all in this space together, which is quite frankly new territory. People have gotten a taste of hybrid. And now we're all trying to figure out what's the good middle ground here? What should we be doing? What could we be doing? And I think it all starts with actually having the conversations with the people that work within your company. Start figuring it out. What do they want? What do they need? You may not be able to meet it all. Quite frankly, that's not realistic either. But how can we meet them somewhere so that they feel that they're heard, understood, appreciated, respected, and so forth?
And I think that's a huge part of it. I think any reasonable employee would know, a company can't cater 100% to my needs. But I think from an employer standpoint, just taking the time to go, we know this is difficult. Let's just sit down and be open and have a conversation. I think that's really goodwill. As long as it doesn't feel like you're just doing it to seem like it's goodwill, but it's actually genuine, I think that goes a long way, right? So
Agree. It's all about communication and relationship building. That goes a long way.
Yeah. So what is one piece of advice that you'd give a business owner who's looking to strengthen their HR infrastructure or functions under that umbrella?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Over the last year or so, I've been working with quite a few growing companies, and again, across different industries like retail, manufacturing, agriculture and farming, professional services, like a wide range. And I would say that one thing that I hear time and time again is business owners feel like they should know everything. And my advice is you can't know everything. And HR is complicated, it's complex, and there's a lot of compliance and risk that comes with it. And so getting it right is really, really important. So seek that expert advice, right? I mean, you can start with these starter kits. We also have an HR audit checklist that's free on our website. And so that's a good
That
place to
website
start.
is, put in the website is just
Oh,
like
yes, upskillconsulting.ca.
awesome.
Yes, and so people can download that as well. So I'd say that's the first one, is you don't have to know everything. So
Yeah.
start to, seek expert advice and to strengthen your processes. And I'd say the second piece of advice is oftentimes when I meet with clients, they recognize that HR is important and they know they need to work on it. But the problem is they want to work on everything at once. They want to fix it all at the same time.
Yeah.
And my commentary to them is slow it down, phase it. First, pick and choose which ones you need to work on first, which I would say is compliance.
Yeah.
And then after that, start prioritizing which ones you need to implement. Because if you do it all at once, you're setting yourself up to fail. People are already exhausted. We can't keep up with the pace of change. But prioritize it. What's going to be most impactful to close some of those gaps that you're experiencing? And that
Yeah.
HR audit checklist on the website would help them do that, because if you check things off and if you notice there's a few items that are not checked off, that may be your area that you want to prioritize first.
Yeah, make it simple, and then at least you can feel good about the things you have done. You're
Yeah,
not
celebrate.
necessarily right, you're not necessarily starting at ground zero, but I would say for every department in your business, take that approach and just don't procrastinate as we tend to do and don't get to it. And there's a huge financial risk if you don't start that early, as we identified. So,
Yes.
so what do you love most about the businesses that you work with?
I just feel very, very privileged, to be able to work with such a wide range of clients, and that they've entrusted us with their important HR work. So for me, I'm so, so grateful for that. I would say the most rewarding thing would be when we start to see business owners go from kind of scrambled, overwhelmed, frustrated, confused to confident,
Yeah.
knowing that they've set their processes and practices, and they understand that there's structure. And so for us, when we start to see that whole firefighting to fire prevention, that's
Mm.
gold. That's gold. And that's when we start to see the return on investment, when they start working on different facets of the business and it hits the bottom line. When you're confident with what you've got in terms of structure for HR, everything becomes easier. It's like a ripple effect.
Yeah, that's your payoff right there. Not just financially, but feeling good about it. You've got a solid infrastructure. So that's a great overview. I would encourage everyone to look at your lessons because they're well organized and you've got lots of great resources. So thank you for that. Before I let you go, I have a random question that I ask all my guests, nothing to do with HR. And the question is, if you could have dinner with someone dead or alive, famous or infamous, who would that person be and why?
Ooh, that's a good question. Oh my goodness. I would choose Simon Sinek.
Ah, I love him.
And
Yeah.
I would tell you why. It just last month, I was on a vacation. I was on a plane ride home, a red-eye flight. I was trying to find something to watch, and I found The Diary of a CEO, and there was Simon Sinek. And I read all of his books. I'm a huge fan. I love the way that he bridges the business and people side, very much aligned to his messaging. And I just think he's a genius in this space. I would love to ask him questions and pick his brain and learn from him. I would love that.
Yeah, I actually watched, I think it was Diary of a CEO, where he was having a conversation with the host, and like he was very down to earth and authentic, but he spoke about actually feeling lonely, and he was very vulnerable. And I'm like, that's very brave. And I found listening to him, he had a very unique definition of what that meant, and how he coped with all of it. So yeah, that's a great choice. So yeah.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so much, Sophia. Really appreciate it. For everyone listening, please check out upskillconsulting.ca. You can't go wrong with Sophia. She's our go-to person for human resources management. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.